Peter. So firstly, it's a pleasure and a delight to welcome everyone for this evening for the talk by Ronnie and Denise about the North Wales Christian Friends of Israel. Now, my association with the North Wales Christian Friends of Israel and Ronnie and Denise is a very special one. In fact, I have with me one of our photo books. Here we are in Llandudno, and actually in the back, here we are on Ronnie and Denise's balcony, the Ganwy. This is one of the places that we always stop by before the special memorial service, which takes place on Holocaust Remembrance Day, which Roy Thurley, together with his phenomenal team, arranges. And by seeing over the years how Ronnie and Denise's involvement and their pride and their connection with this special service, how it is seen over the years, it really has moved me and touched me that whenever possible, I myself will try and take part, and have come for the last few services, and quite a few people over here on the Zoom event has come over to Llandudno to be part of the service, and everyone who goes there always feels moved and uplifted. Furthermore, since our involvement, to be able to see both Roy Thurley and also Jackie and his special team, to be able to welcome them to our synagogue was something really special. And the conversations that I have with Roy is always really inspiring. I remember the first time when they came to see the synagogue, and we were chatting away over different areas of Israel that we've been to, and you see the love of Israel in Roy's and all his congregants' heart and in their minds, and how they speak, and their affection towards Israel is something really, really special that we're going to hear more about by Denise and Ronnie. So without any further ado, it's a pleasure for me to ask Denise and Ronnie to speak. Thank you. I'm going to highlight your screen, Denise, and I'm going to mute myself. So spotlight for everyone. Okay, please.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Amir, for those lovely words that you've just said. Thank you. And I want to say a good evening to everybody, and it's great to see such a large audience. Okay, we've had our house in Ganwy now for more than 30 years, and for the last 10, we've been involved with the Holocaust Memorial Day service. So today, Ron and I will be talking about not only the Christian Friends of Israel, as seen through our Jewish eyes, but also the Holocaust service arranged each year by them in Llandudno. What, might you ask, is the connection? Who are the CFI? Why do they do this, and how did it come about? The involvement of myself and Ronnie is basically to ensure that the entire service will be acceptable to members of our faith, because to them, and whilst being mindful of the genocides which have occurred, this is our Holocaust that they wish to remember. And now for the next part, I'm passing you over to Ronnie.
Yes, who are these people, and what's the rationale behind a relatively small group of Christians who in Llandudno and other places, mainly at their own expense and without any real Jewish support, insist that they must do their best to ensure that it's our Holocaust that will be remembered? A definition shows them to be a non-denominational Christian organization, encouraging the practical and moral support of Israel while educating the church about its Hebraic roots, and who believe that God has a special place for the Jews in his kingdom. It's not evangelical and has no interest whatsoever in conversion. It's estimated that in the United Kingdom, about 30,000 residents identify themselves as Zionists. They divide themselves into about 20 groups to include, for instance, London, Wales, and various cities with supporters of Israel. But all of these were inclusive of Jews, with varying numbers. For instance, the Council of Christian Jews is by its very title inclusive of Jews. The United Kingdom, Christians and Jews, the United Kingdom Christian people who we're talking about has no Jewish members, and their primary object is to express friendship and solidarity and love to the Jewish people. It all began with a meeting of Christian leaders in Jerusalem in 1965 from the United Kingdom, the USA, France, and Israel, who were aware of the urgent need to set up a free framework in which they could bless Israel. But why should they do this? Their mission statement, from which I quote, emphasizes their belief in God's promises made specifically to Israel and her people. We recognize the everlasting covenant between God and Abraham, and as such, it cannot be cancelled by the United Nations, UNESCO, or mankind. In Genesis, the promised land was not only given to Abraham, but to his descendants, specifically through Isaac, and then to Jacob, and to Jacob to his children. The acquisition of this land, it says, will be ongoing, and there's no time limit or end to the words, your descendants. The statement goes on to say that until the Lord gives control and the full extent of the promised land, there is an ever-present need to defend the modern state of Israel from her enemies. The name Christian Friends of Israel was chosen because it expressed how they believed the Christians should relate to the Jewish people, both in view of the church's past history and all that God was leading Israel through. They seek to break down barriers by building bridges of genuine friendship with Israel, and here in England with the Jewish community. And they believe that such relationship leads to reconciliation and mutual understanding, especially with anti-Semitism once again worldwide. They achieve this by prayer, support to Holocaust survivors, new immigrants, terror victims, poor Jewish and Palestinian children, lobbying Parliament, joint events with the Jewish community, taking tours to Israel, and providing accurate views from the Middle East. This is done by way of publication, resources, books, Hebrew learning, teaching conferences, and seminars to better the understanding of the Bible. I want to elaborate a little on the outline mission. The aim of the Christian Friends of Israel is threefold: education to the church, aid, and advocacy. The first of these, education, arises from their hatred of Christian anti-Semitism, which, to my surprise, was first steeply and horrifically expressed by Martin Luther, who until a few weeks ago, I believed to be what we might call a good guy. When I received from the Christian Friends of Israel an article from a friendly magazine called Christianity, and the heading was "The Shocking Truth About Christianity and the Holocaust." Anti-Semitism, as we know, continued throughout the centuries with church leaders and was ultimately endorsed by Hitler. In essence, the CFI states unequivocally that the church is responsible for it. In fact, the church in some cases still believes that God's interest and concern for the Jews ends with the death of Jesus, and likewise his interest in us as the chosen people. As I've indicated, the CFI rather take the view that expressions through the Bible, both Old and New Testament, and the use of the word eternal and the prophecies of the Bible show unequivocally that in their words, that the Messiah will arrive at some unspecified time to come. Who knows when? They don't say, but the creation of the state of Israel, the status of Jerusalem, the establishment there of the US Embassy, the return to Israel of exiles, such as Russians and Ethiopians, and the current immigration of many European Jews, all in our time, indicate that, as we Jews also believe, the Messiah is on his way, although, of course, to them it's returning. This, however, is not, as I had always thought, an integral part of their belief and support. The second aim is that aid and large sums of money, without big institutional donors, are raised for the needy, and particularly Holocaust survivors, and today, Ethiopian refugees. The third aim, that of support and advocacy, includes presence and speaking vociferously in the public arena, such as Trafalgar Square, where we see large Israeli flags, opposing boycotts at premises, and shops such as Kedem, and we all remember that here in Manchester not very long ago, and the recent anti-Semitic rallies, and usually on Shabbat when we are elsewhere. And also, of course, they're not afraid to tread where others fear. Which leads me to the easiest example of this, when a few years ago, you will recall, as I do, the Scuds that were falling on Tel Aviv. And we, bless us, were sitting in our beds, thinking at night how very unfortunate, but we never made the effort to go to Israel. This is, of course, a generality, but the fact is that the Christian Friends of Israel continued with their tours and did go because they did see this as a way of supporting Israel. The people come from all backgrounds, trades, professions, and they're all committed Christians. They're Bible readers, regular attendants at lectures, and I say they tour Israel quite regularly. Some are Hebrew readers and basic Ivrit speakers, but it's not only religion that binds them. Indeed, very much involved with last year's Balfour Centenary celebrations and explanations is the leader of the Landeno group, Roy Thurley, about whom very much more later, and who is an acknowledged authority on Balfour and the San Remo Conference. Although their belief is that Jesus is both the Messiah and the Savior of the world, I stress again that their stand alongside Israel is not conditional upon her acceptance of their belief. Their stated object is comfort and support of the people of Israel. And the CFI believe it's important to bring awareness to the Jewish people of their solidarity with us, illustrating further by way of example upon their aid to Israel. They take items of relief to individuals in the IDF. They help needy congregations in the land, comfort survivors of concentration camps and ghettos, equip and encourage the Jewish Ethiopian communities which struggle to adjust to Israeli society, as well as to reach with aid to the poor, war veterans, widows and orphans. Their distribution center in Jerusalem serves those who've recently made Aliyah, and for elderly pensioners to be able to shop in their own designated clothing store. Those new to the land also received a free gift bag that contains household necessities such as towels, electric kettles, sheets and blankets, and also, which may well surprise you, items for Shabbat and also Sidurim. The center includes a bridal salon which provides wedding gowns, tuxedos and accessories. And again, I point out that we're talking here about Christians in Israel, not Jews. And talking of their charitable work in Israel, many of you, if not the world media, will be aware of Save a Children's Heart, a Jewish charity that carried out heart operations on third world children, both in Israel and in their home countries. The doctors and nurses give their time free of charge, and the hospitals charge a reduced fee for operations. However, Save a Children's Heart can only operate in countries where Israeli doctors are permitted to go. Shevet Achim, which is a Christian charity based in Israel, provides the bridge between those countries and Save a Children's Heart. Founded by an American Christian who arranged for a child from Gaza to be operated on at the Wolfson Hospital in Holon, he subsequently built a team of volunteers from around the world who will identify child patients in need of heart surgery, including those from Syria, Gaza, Iraq, and Kurdistan, arranging their documentation and transport them into Israel. They're accommodated in the Shevet Achim bases in Jerusalem and Jaffa, both before and after their surgery, usually in the Sheba Medical Center, Tel Aviv, or the Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. And then they return to their home countries. They raise funds from around the world to pay for their own expenses and medical fees charged by the hospital. These are all dealt with. I hate to add yet again by Christians. I mention this particular charity because it's one of prime importance to Jackie Thurley, the wife of Roy, who, rather like our own fantastic Vera Cohen with her Gibbons and Carks, which she bases for Christie's, they raise the monies there for the people of Israel. And they do it, of course, likewise with Vera, with their own superb baking. And purely as a matter of interest, one of the young people from Llandudno has just returned from volunteering with Shivat Achim in Jaffa and is now reading medicine in Cardiff. The CFI consider it most important that the church is continually updated concerning responsibility towards the Jewish people. They travel throughout the world, and this enables them to give to the church a first-hand look at what is happening in Israel and to clear up questions of confusion. And they aim to set right the anti-Israel bias that is being propagandized by the secular media. So how did an annual HMD service come to take place in a little shtetl like Llandudno? The Jews who were expelled from Wales in 1290 were formally able to return in 1655. But it was the expansion of the coal mining industry in the 19th century and its lead to major economic growth that really brought about their return. The Jews were among the group who, like so many emigrants from Europe, found in new communities, particularly in the heavily industrialized South Wales valleys. Indeed, virtually every valley has a Jewish community. Just take Llanelli, and I don't know how many of you know that Michael Howard was the son of the Llanelli Chazan. There's Pontypridd, Merthyr Tydfil, and Tredegar, as well as the major cities of Cardiff, Newport, and Swansea. But not surprisingly, they preferred not to work in the mines, but instead became peddlers, moneylenders, and established trading stations, from where eventually these expanded to Bangor and Llandudno in the north. My part of this talk has related to the background of the CFI, who they are and how they reach their objectives. On another occasion, if there should be sufficient interest, and to quote my friend Anthony Davis, if invited, we should be glad to tell you about the golden era of the 20th century for the Llandudno Jewish community, to include personalities and their local businesses, the story of the synagogue, the importance of Llandudno and Colwyn Bay to many Jewish families there during World War II, the inevitable decline afterwards, and its current rebirth as an annual holiday resort for the very Orthodox. But now I'll hand you back to Denise to explain how the annual CFI service came about and its content.
Thank you, Ronnie. So back in 2007, Roy Thurley came north from Sussex. He had been an associate of the founder of the CFI and had a change of lifestyle after 30 years as a successful computer expert to give way to his wife's long-held desire to run a guest house by the sea. Realistically, Roy effectively organises the whole event, along with our small committee, who all, apart from us, live in Llandudno. He has a good knowledge of the Talmud and Hebrew and great enthusiasm for all things Israeli and Jewish. You've heard that tonight. He even has a mezuzah on his doorpost, and his wife bakes her own challahs every Friday. This is his way of life and the way of life of his small band of co-religionists. There were no CFI members in the area, but he took it upon himself in January 2008 to hire the Christian Emmanuel Centre for the evening and set about showing Holocaust-related films on the relevant day to an audience of 30 to 40 people. It was the same again the following year, and going to a seminar held at Bangor University, he met two Jewish couples by chance. Also, there was a local mayor from Llandudno who suggested that application for a grant should be made, and with advertising and the benefit of Roy's inspiration of finding a Holocaust survivor to address the congregants with follow-up schools education, within 4 years, the attendance at the Holocaust meeting had increased to about 180 regardless of their direct association with the CFI. And now we usually get about 250 people at the service held in the hall at the Emmanuel Christian Centre. That's not unlike a shul hall, by the way, but with any Christian-related icons removed. This is attended by several dignitaries, Janet Finch Saunders and Darren Miller, both Welsh Assembly members, as well as several local mayors. In a normal year, we have a keynote speaker. We have always managed to get an actual Holocaust survivor. At first, 6 memorial candles are lit by local school children. Then we have a couple of musical numbers relating to the Holocaust, such as a solo violinist playing the theme from Schindler's List, or a student from the Northern College of Music singing Edelweiss from The Sound of Music, the story of a Christian family's resistance to the Nazis. The service continues with a psalm, usually Psalm 23, sung by the whole congregation to the recognisable tune of Crimond. Who are the keynote speakers we've had in the past? Well, a few years ago, we had Gisela Feldman and her sister Sonia. They came to talk to us. They were on the MS St. Louis as teenagers. That was a fascinating story. 4 years ago, we had the remarkable testimony of Chaim Förster, then the appalling story of Martin Stern, who has to live with the personal guilt of being tricked into betraying his non-Jewish guardians with its inevitable consequences. And Arik Hirsch, who cheated death solely because he managed to jump from one to the other of the 2 queues which were being determined by Mengele for immediate death. The last 2 years, we were privileged to have the testimony of 2 ladies, namely Susan Pollock and Marla Tribich, whose stories, as with the others, beggars belief. There's always a secondary speaker. These have included an authority on the G4, that's the pre-war euthanasia policy carried out by the Germans on young and old, who they did not consider worthy of the Aryan race. Children who spoke movingly of having been to Yad Vashem, and recently, at the specific request of the CFI, Rabbi Amir, to indicate from the Jewish point of view how we, as a people, are affected by the state of anti-Semitism and the precautions which we must now take. I say with some pride that Rabbi Amir received a standing ovation from people who had no prior conception of the steps that have to be taken for the protection of our schools, synagogues, social events, and the necessary work of the Community Security Trust. Then follows a recording of El Mali Rahamim, either made live in Belsen 5 days after its liberation, or on the last occasion, a new recording sung passionately by our own Chazan, Michael Isdale. After Kaddish, the service concludes with the Hatikva, and finally the Welsh National Anthem. At the conclusion of the hour-long service, there are refreshments of cakes and biscuits, which are home-baked by the families of the CFI from vegetarian ingredients and vouchers willingly donated by local supermarkets. Some funding, which includes travel and hotel accommodation for the speaker and the cost of printing, etc., no charges made for the hall, by the way, has hitherto come from the local councils who, even in these difficult times, recognise the importance of educating their children. I want to make special mention here of the synagogue with which Ronnie and I are primarily connected, that's Shari Hayim, which has again this year made a generous donation to our committee for the educational programme. And the following couple of days are equally, if not more important, as there is a schools programme, ably coordinated by Sian Asbridge, one of our committee members, which involves the speaker going into 4 schools to tell his or her story. 8 local schools joined together for this, sending around 200 children each to hear him or her. Bear in mind that these children have never before seen anyone who is Jewish. Their only idea about our people is probably having learnt about Judaism as part of comparative religion at school. yet they're deeply moved by the stories the survivors tell and are frequently in tears. We on the committee reckon around 1,000 school children will hear the story, all told. It's a good number. No charge is ever made for the service, but there are baskets at the door for any personal contributions. The monies raised always go entirely to a Holocaust-related cause, to Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, or previously to Beth Shalom, and this year to Holocaust survivors through the Holocaust Educational Trust, or the survivors in Israel via the CFI. Again, I stress that the CFI hold this event and subsidise this weekend solely of their own volition. Well, obviously this year everything's rather different. We can't attend as an audience in Llandudno or hear the remarkable story of a Holocaust survivor, light our 6 candles or appreciate a visit by Rabbi Amir Elituv as in previous years. And yet, by virtue of the skill and computer expertise of Roy Thurley, these challenges have all been overcome. Nothing was going to deter Roy in a matter so important to him. I'm not going to spoil the surprise of what he's been able to achieve, but I want to mention the special message recorded for the service by Lord John Mann, the government advisor, regarded as one of the world's most admired figures for his fight against anti-Semitism. Roy spoke to him directly to organise this, by the way. We have also ensured that the schools are still included. Preparations are even being made for extracts of the service to be recorded, with an outstanding illustrated YouTube presentation by Jane Woodford, who's a non-Jewish Holocaust educationalist, to go ahead as the secondary schools in Wales are still closed, of course. The service itself will be shown on YouTube rather than live on Zoom. This is to ensure that the whole service is pre-recorded and that there will be hopefully no interruptions on the screen of an obstreperous nature. Roy will be monitoring the whole event throughout and taking down any adverse comments. It is, of course, rather sad that this is necessary. It's a shame. The service will commence at 7 p.m. on Sunday the 31st of January, and for those who wish to participate in the virtual lighting of the candles, may I suggest that you have one of any type available by your side. And if you haven't already received the YouTube link for the service, please ask me for one, by the way. Normally, I would finish by adding that if you've ever wondered what it might be like to hear 250 non-Jewish people singing the Hatikva, I'd have suggested that you come along to this year's service. But for now, I'll just say, hopefully, next year in Llandudno. And I'm going to hand you back to Ronnie now.
Thank you, Denise. Finally, before we take any observations or questions, may I just say how much we appreciate your being with us at this time when there are rather more important things for you to watch on television. I'm not referring to the events in Washington, but to the City and United matches currently in progress. Again, and with particular thanks to Rabbi Amir, thank you all so very much for your listening to us, and hope this has been of some education and interest to you all.
Thank you so much. Firstly, I have just put on the chat link the address of the YouTube event of the Holocaust Remembrance Service. So if anyone wants to save it on the chat and then use it afterwards, obviously it'll go on our synagogue email and we'll make sure that everyone has all the timings. But if you want to just copy the link, I'm going to first pass on to Leela to say a few words and then open the floor for questions. And also if Roy wants to say something as well. But let me just unmute Leela.
That was very nice of you to warn me. How do you know I like them? Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Your talk was absolutely terrific. And I want to extend my thoughts about what happens when we do go to Llandudno, because it is the most moving experience, not just the praying, but the reception that we get afterwards and the warmth that we get from the people who come. It's just phenomenal. And I advise anybody who feels like it to come, please God, next year when we do it. Meanwhile, I want to thank Roy and Jackie. It's so good that they're here and so good that they're still organising everything. And I can't say how much it means to me to go. And I would like to ask one question. How did you originally get involved? Ronnie and Denise, that is.
Well,
Yes.
that's easy enough for us, but it might be more of interest, you know, how Roy got involved in this initially. As far as we were concerned, we tried to give you an indication by saying that we were approached by some of the people, the Jewish people, the very few Jewish people who were there at the time, after Roy had been, after Roy had basically gone to the meeting and had been told about the possibility, after what he'd done, of getting more people involved. And because we knew the two Jewish people in Llandudno at the time, they came to us and said, would you help out? And it was no more than that, I don't think. Am I right, Denise?
Yes, but we're called Bernie and Laura Blank.
Yes, they were called Bernie and Laura Blank. Again, I think they may well be far distant relations to the Blanks, who are members of our congregation, but I can't be assured of that. And it was just the very fact that they came to us. We met them there simply because we were Jewish, and they told us all about this, and would we join them? And quite honestly, it's one of the best things that we've done in the very little contribution that we make to Jewish society.
You make a very big contribution, a very big one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're not very tall.
Can anyone just either wave their hands or make a okay, Joy Wolf, hold on, ask to unmute. Yes, Joy.
Again, that was absolutely super. I'd just like to add my praise to Roy. I've worked with Roy for years and years. He's one of the most active pro-Zionist supporters that we have. And I also reiterate what Leela said, how wonderful it is when we've been to Llandudno and the way we're received. And it's a remarkable, remarkable thing. And I only hope it'll be soon when we can come back in reality. But what they do and what Denise and Ronnie do in helping with it and publicizing it, it's such a worthwhile thing and one of the best events of Holocaust Memorial Day. And we're very lucky to have such wonderful Christian friends.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Jackie, hold on. Just to unmute. Yes, Jackie.
Oh, hello. I want to tell you how Denise and Ronnie invited me to come and stay, bed, breakfast and lunch. It was absolutely lovely in Wales. And I think it was when you had Eric Hirsch. And you did it another time for me when you had Martin Stern. And I was so impressed with that first visit because you also included me in the visits to the schools. And I just saw this huge hall of spellbound children as Eric Hirsch and his wife addressed them. It was tremendously moving. And I think I told you at the time, because you were doing it in a very quiet way, Denise and Ronnie. And I said, this needs to go to the local community. And I think that was how we started it. I think you managed to give a talk to Wheatso. I think that was the first starting point. But it was one of the most amazingly moving visits that I'd ever experienced regarding the Holocaust. It really was. So thank you, Denise and Ronnie. It was a tremendous initiative that you've taken.
Thank you for saying,
Clement.
Jackie, thank you for saying that, but that wasn't necessary. I say it's the very little that we do. And I'm so pleased that people have enjoyed it, have found it an inspiration, and have come on here to listen to our story tonight.
Wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Thanks,
Ronnie and Denise, I'd like to ask a question, because I think it's likely that everybody who is watching and listening to this presentation is, shall we say, of a certain age or within a certain decade, can you be confident that the message which is being transmitted now will be passed on to the next generation and by the next generation?
Clement, can I ask you the same question? We're all in the same boat here.
Yeah.
Like everybody else, I doubt it very much, but we can only do so much. It's just important that we do what we can, which is really what we've been aiming to do.
If I can add something for that question, Clement, when you go to the event in Llandudno, to see the amount of youngsters who attend,
well, that's great.
How they are inspired and how they take part, whether it's through the musical aspect or coming along with their parents or grandparents, it's something which is which gives hope for the future. And please God, they do get inspired from it, coupled with the school visits. We hope that they can carry on that message as much.
And can we involve the children of our congregation in attending the events in North Wales?
I can answer the second part of that question by saying that the presentation which is being made by the non-Jewish educationalist who I told you about was going along to the schools, that is due to be recorded, and that I think will be also, as it's on YouTube, it should be made available to all sorts of people and to ourselves as well, of course, from the transmission, if we give the information to all who may be interested in it.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a marvellous presentation.
Very, very well done.
We've had the benefit of seeing, and it's illustrated and animated as well, with speeches, little speeches and explanations by various people, including one superb one by Jonathan Sachs.
Okay, I'm going to ask the Feingolds, please just unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Ronnie and Denise for such an erudite contribution to my previously lack of knowledge of this event. And I must tell you that if there was an occasion where Hilary and I could attend in the future, then we will do so. The only thing that this has brought to mind is something I read in this morning's paper, and that is the amount of anti-Semitic attitudes in universities today, and the fact that certain universities are almost what they might call, in loose terms, Juden-free. And that is a very disturbing attitude when you're educating young people in Llandudno, but we can't even educate the young people that we're supposed to be educating in universities. So I applaud what Ronnie and Denise are doing and the community in Llandudno. I think it's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clive.
Thank you very much, Clive.
Barbara? Yes.
I just wanted to say it's always lovely to hear Ronnie and Denise talk about this wonderful, wonderful place. And for those of you who don't know, I have for the last 3 years organised a North Cheshire wheat sow trip of 30 people who've been in a coach to this marvellous memorial service. And I can only say that this year we're doing it on video, as you know, but next year, hopefully, I will organise another coach trip so that 30 people again can attend. And we've had the most wonderful time, and Roy Thurley and all his people on his committee do the most magnificent job, and it is a really memorable service. And so for the Feingolds who haven't managed to go, maybe next year you'll come on our trip.
Thank you, Barbara, lovely.
Thank you.
And you do. And don't forget, Barbara, there have been people who've been trying to get onto your coach, which I know goes from Cheadle via Bowden as well, and they haven't been able to because the number of seats on the coach has been insufficient for the number of people who've asked to come. And we will always bear that in mind for next year if we're able to do so. And thank you for your wonderful help, Barbara. You've been a great support to us and also to everybody else connected with this event. I thank you.
Joy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's not all doom and gloom with the young people. UJS, Union of Jewish Students, and also Stand With Us do a huge amount with young people, sixth formers and university students. And Stand With Us's raison d'etre is to have students on campus who can speak up against anti-Semitism and who can speak up against anti-Israel activity. Denise, if you want to let me have, when you've got this presentation available, right, and if you want to let me have it, I'll make sure that Stand With Us circulates it and puts it on our website so that we can get it out to as many people as possible. But I can assure you we have a huge number of wonderful young ambassadors on all the campuses who are doing their very best. I'm not denying that there is anti-Semitism there is, but there's also a huge fight back against it.
Thank you. Pat and Danny.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, Denise and Ronnie, fantastic presentation tonight. Very well done, very efficient and very inspiring. Now, Clement is worried about how will our children and later generations learn about the Holocaust. Well, my parents' generation, who came from Germany in 1939 and dragged me along with them. Well, my one regret in life is that I never asked them any questions about the Holocaust, and they never volunteered anything. So I learned very little from them. And you'll find if you speak to any Holocaust survivors or the families, the same thing applied to them. The Holocaust survivors understandably were not interested in telling their children and grandchildren. So it's up to us. We've got to tell our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren all about the Holocaust. And in that way, the story will be told for many future generations. So all of you, make sure you tell your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren all about the Holocaust, and the story will continue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Barry Brown, leader.
Hi. Very, very interesting, Ronnie. I didn't realise that this meeting was so extensive in Llandudno. I know Llandudno very well, and I know I did when I was working most of the Jewish community across that Gwynedd and Clwyd. Every winter, I've been spending quite a few weeks in Palm Desert, which is next door to Palm Springs. They have a very, very large outdoor memorial to the Holocaust, and it's in great, great detail. I've got lots of photos. If anybody wants them, let me know and I'll email them to you. But last year, I was there, and I went on Holocaust Memorial Day. They had a very, very big meeting. When I went there, I thought this is a bit of a nonsense, but I nevertheless went. There must have been 500 people there. And most of the people that were there were the school children. And they sat fascinated, where the mayors spoke. They weren't all Jewish. There were 2 or 3 survivors who'd come from the cold states and they'd emigrated to California. There was a few Manchester people there that we all know. And it was fascinating that these stories are indeed handed down. I don't suppose it's in the heavy states in New York, but in California, it is certainly well advertised and well attended by school children. I was quite fascinated, but it can be done. But I think it's the schools ministers that have to be behind you. Thought you might be interested in that.
And Barry, thank you so much indeed for that observation. You're quite right. We do stress education. I think Denise mentioned that the education programme, which is put on afterwards, is almost as important as the service itself. Yeah. And that's what we are trying to do. That's our little bit, as I say.
Thank you. Before I close with finishing remarks, Roy, would you like to say anything?
Yes, I can do, Rabbi. Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
I am on. Yeah, good. It's been fascinating to hear what Ronnie and Denise had to say, but also the questions. I mean, a number of people have sort of said, how did I get involved in all of this from the beginning, and I could take you for another 45 minutes and tell you the story, but I'll try and be very brief. Jackie and I first went to Israel in 1976 when we were relatively newly married. We didn't know when we booked the tour that Jackie was actually expecting our first child, so that was an interesting experience. But we went there in 1976, and it was on a Christian pilgrimage tour. And so we went to the place where Jesus did this, and the place where Jesus did that, and the place where Jesus did something else. And it was a fascinating tour. And I came back and I knew that I'd been to Israel and missed something important and didn't know what it was. And it was several years later when I discovered what it was. And this may sound absolutely ridiculous, but I'd been to Israel and I'd missed the Jews. Now, how do you do that? The answer is that we went to Christian sites all the time, virtually. We had we stayed in an Arab hotel, or two different Arab hotels. We had an Arab driver. We had Arab guides. We didn't meet any Jews. So we did 2 weeks in Israel and failed to notice the Jews. And they seriously, you know, but I went along to a talk we were living near Wimbledon at the time, and I went along to the talk in Wimbledon, which was given by a very well-known Christian preacher who has actually recently died, a chap called David Pawson. And he was speaking on the church's debt to the Jews. And it was as he spoke on that I suddenly realized what it was that I'd missed. I'd missed the Jews. And so from that time on, I have been keen to learn about the Jewish roots of the Christian church, at which point I then started finding out about all the anti-Semitism that there has been over the last 2,000 years that has come from the church. And as a result of that, I got involved with Christian Friends of Israel in 1985 when it first began, and was on the board of that. And then when the founder, who I knew very well, retired, they asked me if I'd take over running Christian Friends of Israel nationally, which was down in Eastbourne. So I was down there doing that for 7 years. And during that period, that was 2000 to 2007, that was when the first International Holocaust Remembrance Day was fixed for the 27th of January. I think the first one was, I think they announced that in 2001, and I think it was 2002 when they did the first actual sort of commemoration. And I was involved with that with the group down in Eastbourne, both with the commemoration in Eastbourne and another one in Hastings, which is nearer to where we live. And so I got a kind of an introduction to Holocaust Remembrance Day as a result of that. And then when we moved back up to Llandudno in 2007, when I finished my time down there in Eastbourne, I thought, we've got to do something here. Yeah, we've done it in Eastbourne, we've done it in Hastings, let's do something in Llandudno. And that is why I started as, I can't remember if it was Ronnie or Denise, one of the two mentioned, I started just by showing a couple of films and getting about 30 people, and it's just grown since then. I am confident that this can carry on. So people have been saying, you know, yes, we're all old. You're absolutely right. I'm actually only 37, but I'm dyslexic. You know, we're all getting older. But I'm fairly certain that we need to get younger people involved. I don't know. I know where the younger people from the Jewish community who would, from the Christian community, I could find, definitely. But where they're going to come from the Jewish community, I honestly don't know. So that's something for Ronnie and Denise to do, is to find younger people from the Jewish community in this area so that we can carry this on. I think that's probably all I need to say. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, before I unmute everyone, just to share with everyone the next couple of events that we have, and with the build-up of the Holocaust Remembrance Service, on Monday at 7:30, we have someone called Pinchas Melchior, who is a survivor from Denmark, who was rescued amongst the Danish Jews during the Second World War. He will be speaking to us and giving us a presentation of the history of the Jews from Denmark and their escape to Sweden during the war. And so that should be a fascinating talk. So that's this coming Monday at 7:30. Everyone is welcome. Also, Wednesday, next Wednesday is our Tu B'Shvat Seder, where we have over 30 fruits and have a special service over Zoom. So again, you'll see the details in our synagogue email. On Sunday, the 31st, will be the service being shown on YouTube. And what's very interesting, and I think Roy, you will enjoy it, on the 15th of February, we have a retired admiral from the Israeli Navy called Yossi Ashkenazi, who is going to give us a presentation in how to build a naval maritime power using innovation and technology. So he's going to speak to us over Zoom, sharing with us a presentation that he's soon going to do in over Zoom for an American university. But as Llandudno is by the sea and you have different boats, so this could be also very topical for the naval lovers. So again, so this is on the 15th of February on Monday. An admiral from the Israeli Navy who's just retired after 35 years will be speaking to us over Zoom. I'm going to again thank everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Denise and Ronnie, for your talk and everything that you do. Thank you, Roy and Jackie Thurley, for everything that you do. And again, just to say from my part and everyone who goes over there, the joy, the inspiration that we all have, and we really feel uplifted. And going to the service in Llandudno, the journey probably only takes an hour because of the excitement that we have, but leaving there, the journey takes about 3 hours because we know that we're leaving with such wonderful memories and a heavy heart that we have to depart, but still a really inspiring time that whenever we are there. So thank you very, very much. I'm just going to unmute everyone and ask all to unmute and stop the recording.